Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi. Now today we're going to do a review of some of the new Action Man figures that have been released at the end of 2018, just in time for Christmas. Now these are simpler versions of the figures with limited articulation, but I thought it would be quite nice to take an in-depth look at them and see how well they compare to the vintage Action Man that is what I normally collect. Now these are on sale for £12 and they're just sort of turning up on the market, and there are a few versions of them. You can get the pilot, the sailor and the soldier in this basic form, which means you just get the figure and the uniform, and then there are slightly more expensive versions that come with extra features and weapons and sort of things like that, but the basic figure is the same in those packs. It's just the accessories that you get. So let's take a closer look at the packaging for these figures. Now I've picked up the soldier and the pilot. So this is the soldier here. They have different paint applications on the faces. They come with different colour hair. So this is the blonde soldier. The pilot that I bought has black hair, and there's also a brown haired version. And the box itself is fairly simple, but I actually quite like how simple this is. It's a nice sturdy box, and on the side you get a little sort of diagram showing there's the action soldier, there's the pilot and the sailor, and there's exactly the same on the other side. It would have sort of been nice to have photos or slightly more detail in the colour, but this style matches the figures that were released earlier in the year for the sort of 50th anniversary range. And on the back it has some information about Action Man as the genuine movable action figure, and we're celebrating 3 of the most popular figures of all time, which is the ones I've mentioned. Now these are made by Art and Science and under license to Hasbro, and as I say, these are just out now, so you'll start to see them in the shops. The head of the figure actually looks quite good. I much prefer this to the one that was used in the sort of earlier 50th anniversary. It's actually much more Action Man sort of in the way it looks, but initially, straight away before I've even opened this, there seems to be a little bit of a proportion problem on this figure. His arms look incredibly short. The uniform looks quite nice, but I can immediately see that he looks a little bit sort of stubby on the arms. So let's take a look at the pilot. And again, this is the same box. No change there, nothing changes on any of the backing, and the same picture on the side, but you can see the figure. This one has the dark sort of black hair, and again the face I do quite like. This one's got a helmet, sort of pilot's helmet, and then you can see the uniform. So let's open these up and take a closer look at the figures. So I've got a knife here. I'm just going to cut the sellotape on the end of the box. Let's see if I can open this. Feels like actually quite a tough box. I don't know if I don't really want to rip it, because I'd like to try and keep this box as nice as possible. There we go. So I can open that up and pull the figure out. He is got a protective case around his head, and is just held in by what looks like one little tie band on the back there. So if we undo that, we should be able to remove the figure. So there is the soldier, and I will open up the pilot as well, and then we can take a closer look at them together. So again, let's just get this box open. So, and again he's just held in with one tie clip. So now let's take a closer look at the figures. So here are the figures fresh out of the box, and they actually do feel pretty sturdy, but I just can't get over the fact that their arms are so ridiculously short. If you compare them to the 2 vintage figures I have here, you can see they are at least 1 centimetre, almost 2 centimetres shorter than the arms on the original ones, which makes them look just so odd, and I really don't understand why they would have done that to this sort of figure. It's pretty basic anatomy to get the arms and legs the right length to make it look human, and this just doesn't look human. It's such a shame, because actually when you feel these figures, they're pretty sturdy. The way they're constructed, there is some good articulation on the arms. You can rotate them round, and yeah, they don't feel too bad. And again, the legs are jointed at the knees in a sort of the same way that Cindy and Barbie dolls are, so they've got that sort of clicking joint. And again, these can be rotated around in quite a good few angles, so they certainly aren't too limited in the way they are constructed. And again, the uniforms are actually pretty nice quality. It's made of a fairly nice fabric, and they've got some really nice tiny little dog tags. If you just sort of zoom in there, can you see how nice and detailed those are? They actually do say Action Man on them, so those are particularly nice. Let me take the hat off as well, and let's have a closer look at his face. I actually think the sculpt on this face is very nice. It's very reminiscent of an Action Man. You would know that was an Action Man figure. And I like the fact he's got painted hair, because that's how the original Action Men were. But it's just these arms that really don't sort of seem to suit this figure. They're just too short. So let's take a closer look at the pilot. Again, the costume is not too bad. It's got quite a bit of detailing on it, just sort of sewn detail there. It's a little bit baggy around his bottom, but it actually is pretty reasonable. It's nicely made. Again, it comes with these lovely little dog tags. And we've got this helmet here, which we should be able to remove. It's got an elastic band on that, so let's just take that off. That's obviously some packaging elastic band I've missed there, just to hold it in place. And the helmet's quite nice. It's got a little visor that flips down and a little microphone that flips up, so quite a lot of detail in there. No printer or anything on it, so let's just remove that so we can see the figure underneath. Again, it's the same face mould, which is good, and this one does have the dark hair. There's a version with brown hair, that must be the Sailor, but that doesn't look too bad at all. And the boots, again, pretty nice detailing on them. It just is those arms that look so weird. So I think the next thing we should do is let's take the uniform off and have a look at the figure underneath. Now with the clothes off the figures, and I've taken the clothes off a vintage Action Man as well, it becomes really apparent how stupidly short the arms are. They're an entire hand's length shorter than an original Action Man's hands, and the original Action Man has a really good proportion to his body. He looks very sort of human. This one, I don't know why they've gone and done that. It seems an incredibly stupid thing to do, and it's such a shame, because otherwise this figure would be quite nice. It's very sort of well constructed, and there is actually quite a lot of sort of posability to it. You can really sort of rotate the arms around and pose them, and again the legs can be posed in all sorts of sort of positions and bent at the knee, so you can pose it quite well. But with these short arms, he just looks wrong. He almost looks like a little T-Rex or something. It's so short, which could also mean that the clothes and outfits on this, when you put them on a vintage figure, will look a bit odd as well, which is something I'm going to try in a minute. And also, when he doesn't have his shoes on, his feet are very rubbery. You can see here they've got no structure to them, so it's actually quite hard to stand up. I'm just going to have to bend him in a strange pose. So the next thing I want to try is putting the outfit that I've taken off this figure on a vintage figure, just to see if they've done what I would expect them to do, which is make these sleeves short to match the short arms of these, which would mean that these uniforms will look a bit rubbish on a vintage figure, because I was hoping that we'd be able to sort of swap parts over and put them on each, but it may not be the case. So let's put this outfit on a vintage figure and see how it looks. And here we have a vintage figure with the pilot's outfit put on. The boots didn't fit. The boots are much too small, but that's because the modern figure's feet are much smaller. So I put some vintage boots on him for the moment. And as you can see, the jumpsuit does just about fit, although the sleeves are a little bit too short. It's like he's wearing 3/4 length sleeves, which is not a good look for anyone. So really, I think most of these uniforms are not going to look great on a vintage figure just because the sleeves are too short. Maybe in future it would be great if they could retool this figure and actually make his arms the proper length and sort of more in proportion with the rest of his body, because if they did that, I actually think these are really nice figures. The costuming is good, and the construction of this figure, because it's aimed at a sort of child market, is very nice. It's really quite sturdy, and you can pose it in lots of positions. But these arms, I just can't sort of get away from them. They look terrible, and standing next to a figure with the proper proportions, it just looks so wrong. Now these figures are aimed at kids 3 and up, so the big question is, would they play with them? And I would say I think they probably would, because they are pretty nice figures and they're not really going to notice the fact that there's some proportion problems on them. But for collectors of my age and other people who like Action Man, who are really the people who are probably most likely to buy these, I think they're not going to be that impressed by them. The quality of the figures is nice, the quality of the uniforms is nice, but the proportion of them really makes them look odd, and they just stand out against every other figure because they have these short arms. Now there are some really nice parts to them, and that's, I think the best one is probably these little dog tags. They are lovely, but you know, is anyone going to pay £12 just to get a set of dog tags? I don't think so. So what I really hope happens is that for a future release they make some modifications to them. Mainly, let's update the arms, make them a proper length, and update the uniforms so that they are again long enough to cover those arms, because then we can take the uniforms and the good bits off these figures and put them on vintage figures if we want to. And if we just want to display them with vintage figures, then they'll look correct and they won't look so sort of odd and out of proportion, because I really do like the face sculpt. I think that's lovely, and it's almost going to be worth taking one of the heads off these modern figures and putting it on a vintage body, because I like the head that much, but I just can't get away from the strange proportion of this figure, and that is such a shame, because really a child these days can go for any number of figures. Last year Chad Valley released a set of military figures where you got 4 for £20, and they were all in much better proportion than this. And then there are the World Peacekeeper line of figures, again some really nice sort of military figures in good uniforms. Again, they have proper proportions to them. So I do hope that Art and Science take note of my review and make some changes to this and update them, because without that I'm certainly not going to be buying any more of them, and I know quite a lot of other collectors won't. But I know this is aimed at kids, so maybe I'm the wrong person to be reviewing this, but I do like toys, and if you've watched my channel before you know how much I do like and enjoy toys, and something like this just seems like such a silly thing to have done on a modern toy. Everybody knows about human proportion, we've known about it for hundreds if not thousands of years, and to get it so wrong on a figure like this is such a shame, because it really could have been a great figure. So I hope my review of these modern Action Man figures has been of interest to you, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.